Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you've been following physics, well, you know the big story, the elephant in the room, has been this kind of century-long divorce.
Right. General relativity on one side,
Yeah.
cosmic scale, gravity, space-time curvature, all very grand.
Majestic, yeah. And then on the other side, there's quantum mechanics.
Mhm.
Weird, fuzzy, probabilistic,
Mm.
governing the tiny stuff, particles, entanglement.
And they just don't play well together. It's not just disagreement. Their fundamental languages, the mathematics, they're incompatible.
It's the biggest headache in theoretical physics,
Yeah.
really. And every attempt to fix it, string theory with its extra dimensions or loop quantum gravity trying to quantize space itself.
They've all basically treated it like we have these two separate layers of reality, and we just need to figure out how to stitch them together.
Right.
Build that bridge across the gap.
But today, we're diving into something completely different. We've got source material here proposing that the gap itself, the chasm, it's an illusion.
An artifact, yeah.
We're looking at the unified coherence theory of everything UCTE from Philip Randolph Lillian. And it doesn't try to bridge the gap. It says the split is just an artifact of coherence reduction. It's claiming to define physics at its absolute deepest level.
Exactly. Lillian's argument, essentially, is that if reality is fundamentally unified, then the split we see in our theories must come from how we're looking at it, how we measure it, not from reality itself.
So our mission today is to really get a comprehensive grip on this core claim, that everything, space, time, forces, maybe even consciousness, it all emerges from just one single coherence-driven manifold.
That's the journey. And that unified manifold, that's the first big piece of vocabulary we need to tackle.
Okay, let's get into it.
Right. So the foundational concept, the heart of UCTE, is the Finsler coherence hyperfractal phase space.
Okay, well, FCHP for short, I assume.
Definitely FCHP. Unless you really want to impress someone, maybe.
Maybe not FEHP. I'll try to remember that. But the point is, this isn't just some abstract math thing, is it? The sources say SDHP is the stuff of reality.
That's the claim. It's the single source from which everything physical emerges. Space, time, matter, energy, all of it, generated from this FCHP manifold.
Okay. And here's the part that really caught my eye, the aha moment you mentioned before we started.
Yeah, this is the big break from, well, pretty much everything else. UCTE says the fundamental forces, electromagnetism, the weak force, the strong force, the things governed by U1, SU2, SU3 in the standard model.
They aren't just arbitrary rules or symmetries we've found.
No, they are geometric properties of this FCHP space itself, intrinsic to it. The forces literally are the shape, the structure of this underlying reality.
That completely flips the script. Instead of forces acting in space, the forces are aspects of the space.
Precisely, a total ontological shift. So let's dig into what makes this FCHP geometry so unique.
So first step, we have to kind of ditch our usual picture of the vacuum, right? Empty space, the stage where things happen. UCTE says that's wrong.
Completely wrong. Hashtag 1.1, the Finsler coherence hyperfractal phase space, FCHP. The FCHP isn't passive. The source material calls it the coherence vacuum. It's this primal, active, resonating structure. And it's identified with something called Zeta Naught.
Zeta Naught.
Okay.
And the key idea here is coherence comes first.
Exactly. Coherence is primary, fields are secondary. That's the mantra. We're used to thinking of fields interacting, maybe creating coherence. This flips it.
So the coherence is the baseline state. And fields, like the electromagnetic field, are just patterns within that.
Structured patterns, yeah. FCHP is described as pure potential resonance. It exists before anything we'd call physical manifestation. The fields of the standard model, they're like stable ripples, highly reduced patterns on this deeper coherence manifold.
Okay, that's a big conceptual leap. Now, the geometry itself, Finsler geometry. Right, Finsler. We know general relativity is Riemannian geometry.
Right. Riemannian geometry is great, but it basically assumes space is locally isotropic, meaning measuring a meter stick gives the same result regardless of which direction you point it, more or less. It's smooth.
Like measuring on the surface of a perfect sphere.
Kinda, yeah. But Finsler geometry, it's different. It allows the metric, the very measure of distance, to depend on the direction you're measuring in.
So moving left might be inherently different geometrically than moving up.
Exactly. Think of it like trying to move through, a dense crystal lattice or maybe wading through thick syrup. The resistance, the pathway, it depends on your direction.
And why is that directionality so important for this theory?
Because it automatically, intrinsically encodes two crucial geometric features. chirality or handedness.
Like left-handed versus right-handed particles?
Precisely. And torsion, which is like a twisting quality in the space. Standard Riemannian space doesn't inherently have these. You usually have to add them in via external fields or forces.
Ah, okay. And chirality and torsion are fundamental to explaining things like the weak force and electromagnetism.
You got it. So UCTE isn't saying these forces arise from abstract symmetries we impose. It's saying they are the unavoidable geometric consequences of existing within and moving through this directionally dependent Finsler manifold. The twists and the handedness are baked into the fabric of reality from the start.
The geometry is the precursor to the forces. Hashtag 1.2 hyperfractal dimensionality and Matthew Villers.
Okay, so if space isn't just an empty box, how do we get structure? How do dimensions arise? UCTE throws out the idea of extra, hidden, curled-up dimensions, like in string theory.
Right, no compactified dimensions here. So what's the alternative?
It proposes hyperfractal dimensional emergence. Dimensions aren't fixed axes like x, y, z. They unfold fractally.
Fractally, like self-similar patterns appearing as you zoom in.
Kind of, yeah. They emerge from successive stages of coherence reduction. Think of it as a hyperfractal ladder of emergence. Each step down the ladder reveals a new layer of structure, a new dimension in a sense.
So what defines a dimension then, if not an independent axis?
Each layer is described as a resonance shell. Imagine a really complex musical chord. As you analyze it more closely, you find simpler harmonies nested inside, and then maybe even simpler ones inside those.
Okay.
Our familiar 3+1 dimensions, 3 space, 1 time, are just the first, most stable, large-scale resonance shell that crystallized out of the initial coherence reduction. Deeper dimensions aren't separate places. They're just finer, nested levels of the same underlying fractal resonance pattern.
So they're not hidden away. They're inherent, deeper frequencies within the structure we already inhabit. We just don't usually interact with them directly.
That's a great way to put it. Our everyday interactions happen at a certain resolution of this hyperfractal. And the whole structure, this entire ladder of emergence, is anchored by Zeta Naught.
Zeta Naught again, the generative nullity.
It sounds almost mystical. What is it, physically speaking? It's defined as the ontological ground state of coherence, the state of maximum possible unity, maximum potential. It's not nothingness in the sense of zero. It's pregnant potential, the ultimate source code before any structure appears.
So Methkelzur, the coherence is absolute, and differentiation or structure is basically zero.
Exactly. And when structure does emerge, a particle, a field, a dimension, it's not created from nothing. It's a localized reduction, a patterning of the infinite coherence potential held within Mathel dollars.
And Zeta Naught plays a crucial role beyond just being the source.
Yes, it's the ontological anchor. It ensures that overall coherence is conserved, even as the universe differentiates and structures emerge. As potential coherence becomes structured reality, the total balance sheet, anchored in Mathel dollars, remains constant. It's the fundamental invariance principle of UCTE. Hashtag 1.3 unification as reduction.
Okay, let's connect this back to the big problem. Unifying general relativity and quantum mechanics. If FCHP is the ground floor, how does it bridge that gap we talked about?
Well, the core assertion is that there is no gap to bridge. Relativity describing space-time curvature and quantum mechanics describing probabilistic resonance, they aren't fundamentally different regimes.
They're just two different ways of seeing the same underlying process.
Exactly. Two different aspects, or maybe shadows, of the single process of coherence reduction happening within the FCHP. One view emphasizes the large-scale, low-frequency curvature aspects, relativity. The other emphasizes the small-scale, high-frequency probabilistic aspects, quantum mechanics. But the engine underneath is the same.
And unifying them means redefining our most basic concepts, space and time.
Absolutely. Space, in UCTE, gets redefined. It's not a container, it's coherent scaffolding. A resonance lattice, a structure stabilized by coherence itself, it's the framework holding the potential.
Okay, space is the structure. What about time?
Time is redefined as functional coherence flow. It's not treated as another dimension like space. It's the measure of the process of coherence reducing, of structures unfolding, of transitions occurring within that scaffolding.
So time is the rate at which the cosmic movie plays, driven by changes in coherence.
You could think of it like that. It's fundamentally tied to the dynamics of the coherence manifold itself.
Now, if time is functional flow, linked to the local coherence gradient, does that mean time isn't constant everywhere? Could it speed up or slow down depending on the local structure?
That's exactly what it implies, and it offers a completely new perspective on things like gravitational time dilation.
Ah,
Yeah.
instead of just space-time being warped by mass.
It's the actual rate of coherence flow that's being affected. In regions of high mass or energy density, you have very steep coherence gradients. This density, this steepness in the scaffolding, fundamentally slows down the rate at which coherence can locally unfold or transition.
So time itself, the functional flow, literally slows down near massive objects because the underlying coherence process is impeded.
Precisely. It's not just a geometric illusion of warped rulers and clocks. It's a change in the fundamental operational rate of the universe at that location.
Wow, okay. Space is the structure, time is the flow rate through that structure. That really sets the stage for understanding how forces and particles, the actual stuff, emerge from this picture. All right, we've established this FCHP baseline and the idea that forces are somehow geometry. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. How do specific forces, like the ones in the standard model, actually emerge from this FCHP geometry? Hashtag 2.1, the concept of gauge emergence.
Okay, the central idea here is gauge emergence. The standard model forces associated with those symmetry groups, U1, SU2, SU3, they aren't fundamental axioms you just plug into the universe.
They're not rules imposed from outside.
No. They are emergent geometric operators that naturally arise from the FCHP itself. They appear as necessary byproducts or coherence residues when the initial undifferentiated coherence of Zeta Naught starts to break down and form structure.
So as the universe cools or differentiates, it naturally settles into these specific geometric patterns that we recognize as forces.
Exactly. And these patterns, these stable states, are stabilized by what the theory calls coherence operators, symbolized as Hasse-Marigold.
Fancy doll. What do these operators do?
Think of them as the rules of stability, or the structural mechanics for the FCHP. They allow a complex resonance pattern, like the one corresponding to electromagnetism, to hold itself together, to persist long enough to be measurable as a field or interact as a force. They ensure the emerging structures are stable, not just random fluctuations.
So the universe doesn't just dissolve into noise. These operators lock in specific geometric forms. And this happens sequentially.
Yes, the theory describes it as a series of resonant cascades. As the overall coherence level drops, or as coherence gradients exceed certain critical thresholds symbolized by lambda, the system undergoes phase transitions, stabilizing into successively more complex structures.
Like water freezing into ice, but for the fabric of reality itself.
That's a decent analogy. Each cascade corresponds to a specific gauge symmetry emerging, locking in a new set of physical rules for that layer of reality.
And there's a specific order to this cascade.
Yes, the conceptual sequence laid out is absolutely fundamental. It starts with a pure vacuum in mathematical Zeta dollars. Then the first differentiation is resonance, which stabilizes into symmetry, the gauge groups, which manifest as fields, which give rise to particles, which condense into matter, and eventually, through incredible complexity, enable life.
Wow, so that cascade puts everything, from the vacuum to life, on one continuous spectrum of emergence through coherence reduction.
Absolutely. Life isn't separate. It's just a very, very complex, highly stabilized resonance pattern emerging late in the cascade. Hashtag 2.2 detailed gauge mapping, chirality and torsion.
Okay, let's map these forces to the FCHP geometry, starting with the simplest, U1 electromagnetism.
Right. U1 electromagnetism is linked to the most basic geometric feature emerging from FCHP, torsional resonance or simple curvature. Think of an elementary twist or phase rotation within the coherent scaffolding itself.
A twist in the fabric.
Yeah. Its physical role is to establish the electromagnetic scaffolding and act as a kind of dispersive torsion field. It's the simplest way the FCHP can deviate from perfect uniformity.
Okay, wait. You said torsional curvature, but general relativity also deals with curvature. How does UCTE distinguish the curvature of electromagnetism from the curvature of gravity? That's often a sticking point in unification theories.
Excellent question. It's crucial. The distinction lies in what is being curved. General relativity describes the curvature of the metric, the measure of distance and time intervals caused by the presence of mass and energy. It warps the rulers and clocks of space-time. U1 emergence, however, describes the torsional curvature, the twisting of the underlying coherent scaffolding itself, the FCHP manifold. It's an inherent twist within the fabric, existing even before localized mass concentrations. So gravity affects paths and time flow due to massagey. U1 affects charge interactions and phase due to the intrinsic torsion of the coherence medium. Both involve geometry, but different aspects of it.
Got it. Different types of geometric deformation. Okay, next step in the cascade. SU2, the weak interaction. This one's associated with particle decay and handedness.
Exactly. SU2, weak interaction, maps directly onto chirality, that intrinsic left-right-handedness we talked about earlier, which is built into the Finsler geometry of FCHP. SU2 governs spin behavior, parity violation, and this is a huge point. It's proposed as the primary driver of mass emergence.
Mass emergence. Okay, this is where UCTE directly challenges the Standard Model's Higgs mechanism, right?
It does, radically. The Standard Model says particles get mass by interacting with a pervasive Higgs field. It's like wading through molasses.
Yeah, the Higgs field drags on them, giving them inertia or mass.
UCTE proposes something different. Mass isn't acquired through interaction with an external field. Mass, effective mass, is an intrinsic property arising from stabilized coherence asymmetry within the chiral SU2 layer of the FCHP.
So because the SU2 geometry has a built-in handedness, a directional preference, stabilizing a pattern within that chiral environment inherently requires a certain amount of energy, which we perceive as mass.
That's the essence of it. Mass is the energy cost of maintaining a localized, stable coherence pattern within an asymmetric chiral geometric background. It's a property of the particle's relationship with the structured SU2 vacuum.
So what about the Higgs boson that we discovered at the LHC?
UCTE reinterprets the Higgs boson. It's not the source of mass. Instead, it's seen as a specific, observable resonance event, a particle excitation that occurs during the process of SU2 coherence stabilization. It's a signal that the mass-giving geometric stabilization is happening, a kind of byproduct rather than the fundamental cause.
So the Higgs particle is real, but its role is reconceptualized. It's evidence of the SU2 geometric process, not the agent granting mass itself.
Exactly. Mass is fundamentally geometric in this view.
Okay, that's a major departure. Now, the final Standard Model force, SU3, the strong interaction holding quarks together.
SU3, strong interaction, requires an even higher level of geometric complexity. It's mapped to condensive coherence or complex torsion. Imagine not just a simple twist, but a really intricate multi-axial lattice of torsional resonances, like a complex geometric knot.
More structure needed to bind things that tightly.
Right. Its physical role is organizing color charge, the source of the strong force, and enabling nuclear binding through this process of coherence condensation. It represents the most complex, stabilized geometric configuration needed to form stable matter as we know it.
So we can visualize this whole emergence using that threshold ladder again.
Yeah, the symbolic sequence makes it clear. You start with the pure coherence potential of the Zeta Naught vacuum. It reduces across specific coherence eigenvalues, the lambdas.
The first threshold gives you the torsional twist of electromagnetism. Then,
second threshold gives the chirality and mass emergence of the weak force. And then,
second threshold gives the chirality and mass emergence of the weak force. And then,
actually, third threshold gives the complex torsional binding of the strong force.
But the sequence in the sources continues.
Right. It doesn't stop there.
Zero lambdas plus tall.
Which takes us beyond the Standard Model. Hashtag 2.3 beyond the Standard Model.
SU4 plus SU. Okay, SU3 covers quarks and gluons, all known fundamental matter interactions. What is this next step, SU4 plus Bill, supposed to represent?
SU4 plus emergence represents hypothesized higher modes of coherence, deeper layers of the FCHP geometry that aren't typically accessed or observed in our everyday particle physics. It suggests the Standard Model is just the ground floor of physical reality, the most stable, low-energy reduction patterns.
Like higher harmonics on that resonance shell idea.
Exactly. Higher frequency, more complex stabilization patterns might exist, governed by this SU4 plus geometry.
And what phenomena might be operating under these SU4 plus rules? What mysteries could it potentially solve?
The source material specifically links SU4 plus to two massive puzzles in cosmology and particle physics: dark matter and neutrino properties, particularly their mass.
Dark matter. So in UCTE, dark matter isn't necessarily some new exotic particle we haven't found yet.
Not necessarily. It could be understood as geometric condensation within this higher SU4 plus coherence layer. Imagine structures forming in this deeper resonance shell.
Structures that would interact gravitationally, because gravity is a property of the underlying FCHP metric that permeates all layers.
Right. But they might remain invisible to our familiar forces, electromagnetism, weak. Wrong, SU3, because those forces operate primarily within their own lower-order geometric layers.
So dark matter could literally be the structure of the next dimensional layer down the hyperfractal ladder, interacting only through the base geometry, which is gravity.
That's the proposal. A highly coherent, stabilized geometric structure from the SU4, plus reduction invisible to our standard probes. And neutrinos fit in here too.
How so? Their tiny masses and oscillations are weird.
UCTE suggests neutrinos might be particularly sensitive to these higher SU4 plus coherence modes. Their oscillations and small mass could be signs that they are feeling or interacting slightly with this deeper geometric layer, perhaps mediating between SU3 and SU4 plus structures. They become crucial probes for physics beyond the standard model.
Okay, to this next section. This is where UCTE seems to get really radical, maybe even philosophical. It brings the observer, even consciousness, right into the fundamental workings of physics.
It definitely pushes the boundaries. It moves beyond just unifying forces and delves into ontology, the nature of being, and reality itself. And yes, the observer plays a central active role, not just a passive bystander. Hashtag 3.1, the duality of coherence dynamics.
To understand this, we first need to grasp a duality in how the FCHP operates, right? There are these operators.
Right. The theory introduces a fundamental duality in the operators governing the FCHP dynamics. They are constantly working to both sustain coherence and reduce coherence. You have symmetry operators and resonance operators.
Okay, symmetry operators. They sound like they keep things orderly.
They do. Their role is to stabilize coherent structures, preserve symmetry, maintain the integrity of the whole. They push towards unity, ensuring patterns hold together and align with the universal coherence field. Think of them as the conservation aspect.
And the resonance operators, they do the opposite.
They introduce asymmetry. They are the agents of differentiation, structure formation, and coherence reduction. They are the translators, taking the pure potential coherence and collapsing it into specific, manifest forms like a particular particle state or the specific data point you get from a measurement. They drive change and create distinctiveness.
Okay, so a constant push and pull between maintaining unity and creating diversity. Now, how does the observer fit into this?
The act of observation, or measurement in the traditional quantum sense, is fundamentally identified with the asymmetry resonance operator, or ARO.
The ARO. So when we measure a quantum system,
We are, according to UCTE, acting as an ARO. The function is universal. To reduce the coherence of the system, break its potential symmetries, like being in multiple states at once, and select out a single discrete, measurable outcome. It collapses potential into actuality. The ARO is the universal coherence selector.
it forces a choice from the possibilities. And what's the counterbalance to this constant reduction or collapse?
That's where consciousness, or at least the function associated with it, comes in. It's identified with the symmetry coherence operator, or SCO.
SEO, its job is.
Its function is crucial: to restore coherence, to amplify symmetry, to take all those discrete fragments produced by ARO processes, like sensory data or measurement results, and integrate them back into a unified, coherent whole, like our conscious experience. The SCO sustains stability against the endless fragmentation caused by the ARO. It pushes back towards unity and integration.
Okay, this is a massive claim. Consciousness is a fundamental physical operator, the SEO. The obvious pushback is, isn't this just philosophy? Idealism. How does UCTE frame SEO physically to avoid making it sound like mind over matter?
That's the critical point. The sources are careful not to equate SEO exclusively with human consciousness. ARO and SEO are presented as universal physical mechanisms operating at all scales.
So a complex system organizing itself, that's SEO at work. A crystal forming.
Potentially, yes. Or even just a stable atom maintaining its structure against perturbations. The key is the function: coherence, integration, and symmetry restoration. A quantum measurement device clearly performs an ARO function, selecting an outcome, even though it's not conscious. The SCO represents the equally fundamental physical process of integration that allows systems, atoms, molecules, ecosystems, brains to maintain coherence and stability.
So human consciousness is just a very complex, high-level manifestation of this universal SEO function operating within a biological system.
Exactly. It's defined by its effect, coherence, integration, resulting in unified subjective experience, not necessarily by the substrate, like neurons. It's proposed as a fundamental dynamic of the FCHP itself, not just an emergent property of biology, although biology provides a sophisticated platform for it. Hashtag 3.2, the meta operator and the engine of becoming.
And these two operators, the ARO reducer and the SKO integrator, they aren't really separate forces fighting each other.
No, they're two sides of the same coin. UCTE unifies them into a single bidirectional dynamic process called the meta-operator, symbolized as math call.
The meta-operator. So this is the engine driving everything.
It's described as the ontological engine of the universe. It is the process of becoming. Math call constantly mediates this dynamic tension. ARO reduces potential to actuality, collapse. SKO integrates actuality back into coherent unity, renewal.
And you need both.
Absolutely. Constant ARO collapse without SEO renewal would just lead to disintegration, information loss, dust. Constant SEO renewal without ARO collapse would mean nothing ever differentiates, nothing manifests. Reality remains stuck as unexpressed potential in Zeta Naught. Existence is this perpetual cycle, this dance of the meta-operator.
And there's a mathematical way to frame this cycle.
Yes, the source suggests a conceptual framing like PST plus 1 mathcalo, where nathcalo is the state of reality at time, mathcalo represents the observation reduction collapse function, ARO, and mathcalo represents the coherence integration function, SCO. The state at the next moment is the result of integrating the collapsed state from the previous moment. It ensures continuity through this cycle.
This constant cycling of reduction and integration, it leads to maybe the most profound implication of this section.
Which is observer-dependent dimensionality.
Meaning the very dimensionality of the reality we experience isn't fixed. It depends on the observer.
That's the assertion. Because different observers, whether a quantum detector, a human brain, maybe even a complex gravitational system, operate with different OSCO capabilities, they effectively select or stabilize different layers of the FCHP's hyperfractal structure.
So my brain, tuned to process sensory data from the U1, SU2, SU3 layers, stabilizes a perception of 3 plus 1 dimensional reality.
Right. Your biological Orozco system is optimized for that layer. But a different kind of observer, maybe one sensitive to those hypothetical SU4 plus modes.
Like that dark matter structure we talked about, or a future neutrino telescope.
It might interact with and stabilize a reality possessing additional measurable dimensional properties, effectively experiencing a different slice of the hyperfractal FCHP.
Which implies different realities based on different observer functions could coexist, interpenetrating realities.
That's the startling conclusion suggested by the framework. Reality isn't a single fixed stage, it's a spectrum of potential dimensional layers, and different observer systems actualize different subsets of that potential. Hashtag tag 3.3 cosmological and experiential implications.
If this meta-operator is the universal engine, we should see its signature on the largest scales, cosmologically. How does the Orozco dynamic play out there?
The source material offers compelling, perhaps analogical examples. Black holes are presented as functioning like colossal cosmic AROs.
The ultimate reducers.
Exactly. They represent the endpoint of coherence reduction on a massive scale, collapsing structure, matter, even information, from an external perspective, into a state of maximum density and minimum structural complexity, pure hypergravity. They maximize local entropy by reducing structure.
Okay, so if black holes are the cosmic AROs, the great collapsers, what's the cosmic SKO? The great integrator or renewer.
The counterpart proposed is quasar hypercores. These incredibly energetic galactic centers are seen as functioning like cosmic SKOs.
How so? They blast out energy.
Precisely. They act as enormous engines of coherence projection and renewal. They take in matter via accretion, but radiate vast amounts of energy and organized structure, like jets, back out, sustaining complexity and seeing the intergalactic medium. They represent a cosmic scale pushback against simple gravitational collapse, mediating renewal and structure formation across galaxies.
A cosmic balance between collapse, black holes, and renewal, quasars, driven by the meta-operator dynamic. Now let's bring it down to our scale, the human experience.
Here, the Orozco dynamic maps directly onto perception and consciousness. Our sensory systems act as AROs, constantly reducing the overwhelming flux of information from the environment, light waves, sound waves, etc., into discrete neural signals.
Collapsing the wave of potential sensations into specific data points.
Yes. And then, the SCO function, which we experience as consciousness or awareness, takes those fragmented data points and integrates them into a unified, coherent, subjective experience. The seamless visual field, the rich soundscape, that's the SCO binding the ARO's discrete output.
And this is where UCTE offers a definition for qualia, the subjective what it's like feeling, like the redness of red or the warmth of the sun.
Exactly. Qualia aren't just weird byproducts of brain chemistry. In this framework, they are defined as the subjective resonance images that emerge when the SCO integrates the objective data from the ARO collapse into a stable, subjective, coherent structure within the observer system.
So the feeling of red is the subjective shape of the integrated coherence pattern corresponding to that specific light frequency as processed by my biological Aerosco system.
Precisely. It makes qualia physically real and meaningful relative to the observer system doing the integrating. It's the internal representation of the successfully integrated information.
Which leads inescapably to the conclusion that reality isn't something we passively observe. It's fundamentally participatory.
Yes. It's co-generated constantly through this reciprocal interaction between the observer function, the meta-operator within us, and the coherence field, the FCHP potential. We aren't just watching the movie, we are intrinsically part of the projection system.
Okay, this is all fascinating, mind-bending stuff. But a theory of everything needs more than just conceptual elegance. It needs to be testable. Where does UCTE predict we should look for actual hard evidence? How can we distinguish it from standard physics? Hashtag tag 4.1 coherence eigenvalues and fundamental constants.
One of the most powerful predictive avenues comes from the idea that coherence itself isn't just a smooth background, it's quantized. The reduction process happens at specific thresholds governed by those coherence eigenvalues, lambda we mentioned.
Right, the lambda is associated with U1, SU2, SU3 emergence.
Exactly. Now, UCTE makes a truly revolutionary prediction about the fundamental constants of nature. Things like the speed of light, Planck's constant, the fine structure constant,
These aren't just numbers we measure and plug into equations.
No. The theory proposes they are surface projections of deeper eigencoherence. They are the specific numerical values that emerge naturally when the FCHP geometry stabilizes at these critical lambda thresholds. They are outcomes of the geometry.
Meaning, we could potentially derive these constants from the theory itself, instead of just measuring them.
That's the holy grail, yes. Take the fine structure constant, alpha roughly 1137, which governs the strength of electromagnetism. If UCTE is correct, the value of alpha must be derivable from the specific geometry and the coherence eigenvalue associated with the U1 reduction within the Finsler framework.
If someone could calculate alpha from the FCHP geometry and get the right answer,
it would be monumental. Instant validation of the framework, because standard physics has no way to predict alpha. It has to be measured experimentally. UCTE aims to turn fundamental constants from empirical inputs into predictable geometric outputs. Hashtag tag 4.2 testable discriminants.
Okay, deriving constants is a long-term goal. What about more immediate experiments? What specific phenomena should we look for?
The sources outline several key areas testable discriminants. First, look for threshold behavior. If gauge forces emerge at specific coherence thresholds, then it might be possible, under extreme conditions, to push the local environment across such a threshold. We should look for situations where gauge modes might effectively turn on or turn off or change their strength significantly.
Where would we find such extreme conditions?
Maybe in highly structured metamaterials in the lab designed to manipulate local coherence, or in extreme astrophysical environments near magnetars, inside neutron star mergers, places where coherence gradients could be unimaginably steep. Finding evidence of, say, U1 culling strength varying dependent on the coherence environment would be huge.
Okay, threshold behavior, what's next?
Second, and maybe the most direct test. Look for evidence of the underlying Finsler geometry itself through anisotropy or Finsler traces.
Anisotropy meaning direction dependence.
Exactly. Since Finsler geometry is inherently directional, we need high-precision experiments searching for tiny, direction-dependent effects on the propagation of particles or light. Things standard physics says shouldn't happen.
Like what specifically?
The sources suggest things like comparing ultra-precise atomic clocks oriented in different directions relative to, say, cosmic microwave background flow. A consistent, tiny difference in their ticking rate depending on orientation would be a direct signature of anisotropic space.
Or looking at light from distant sources.
Yes, searching for cosmic birefringence, a rotation of light's polarization over cosmic distances that shows a directional dependence. Or looking for anomalies in neutrino propagation over long baselines that depend on the direction of travel. Any confirmed direction-dependent anomaly in fundamental physics would strongly support a non-Riemannian, potentially Finsler, geometry for spacetime.
Third discriminant, the coherence mass link. This goes right after the Higgs mechanism.
Absolutely critical. If mass is a coherence residue related to SU2 chirality, we should be able to influence a particle's effective mass by manipulating the local coherence gradient without involving the Higgs field directly.
How could we manipulate the coherence gradient?
That's the challenge. Perhaps using highly structured, resonant electromagnetic fields or maybe advanced quantum cooling techniques to create regions of extremely high or low coherence. The prediction is that we should see tiny shifts in particle masses, measurable as mass shell anomalies, that correlate directly with the applied coherence modulating field. That would be direct evidence against the standard Higgs model explanation.
Okay, and the fourth area?
Probing the higher dimensions via neutrino anomalies.
Because neutrinos might feel the SU4 plus layer.
That's the hypothesis. We need to scrutinize neutrino oscillations even more closely, looking for deviations from the standard PM&S mixing framework, especially at higher energies or over longer baselines. Are there subtle high-frequency oscillations superimposed on the known ones? Are there unexpected neutrino condensation effects under extreme conditions? Any anomaly pointing beyond standard 3-neutrino mixing could be a window into that next SU4 plus layer of FCHP geometry. Hashtag 4.3 applications, engineering pathways.
All right, assuming UCTE holds up and we find this evidence, the technological implication seems staggering. What kind of engineering pathways does the theory suggest might open up?
Well, the most obvious and perhaps most speculative is in propulsion and energy. If you can learn to manipulate the FCHP coherence thresholds,
You could potentially trigger energy release directly from the vacuum structure.
that's the idea. Not zero-point energy in the usual, often misunderstood sense. This would be coherence-based extraction. You'd engineer specific conditions to locally destabilize the coherence manifold, pushing it across a lambda threshold to release structured energy. Think controlled vacuum decay harnessed for power, or even propulsion systems interacting directly with the FCHP scaffolding, potentially bypassing the need for reaction mass.
That sounds like science fiction, but it follows from the theory's premises. What else?
Given the fundamental role of the meta-operator in processing information, the ARO selecting, the SEO integrating, there's a pathway towards coherence computing.
Competing based on the universe's own ontological engine.
Exactly. Instead of just binary logic, Sears and ones, imagine continuous interplay of coherence reduction, ARO, and integration, SEO. This meta-operative logic, SEO Dretzless ARO, could be the foundation for truly novel AI.
Intelligent AI, the sources call it.
Yes, systems that don't just process data algorithmically, but can genuinely integrate diverse coherence patterns into new, stable, meaningful structures, potentially mimicking the way consciousness synthesizes experience, or how the universe itself evolves complexity. It's a radically different paradigm for computation and intelligence. Hashtag OUTRO. So wrapping up this deep dive, the unified coherence theory of everything, with its FCHP manifold, it really forces a complete shift in perspective. It argues that physics doesn't start with particles, fields, or even space-time as we know them. It starts with coherence and variance, anchored in Zeta Naught.
And everything else forces matter. The dimensions we perceive, the flow of time, it's all emergent geometry. The result of sequential coherence reduction, stabilized by these inherent geometric operators.
Right. The universe isn't just a collection of things happening according to laws. The structure is the laws, emerging dynamically from this underlying coherence field via the meta-operator. It suggests a universe that is intrinsically self-organizing, and, in a way, self-aware through this constant interplay of reduction and integration.
And hopefully you, our listener, now have a solid, comprehensive grasp of this fascinating, if challenging, unification proposal. We've journeyed beyond the old relativity versus quantum mechanics divide into a framework where geometry gives rise to forces, mass emerges from handedness, and the vacuum is buzzing with potential.
And crucially, where the observer isn't just a spectator, but an active participant, a fundamental operator within this cosmic engine.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take away and mull over. If dimensionality itself truly is observer-dependent, shaped by the Orozco functions of the observer, and if your own awareness, your consciousness, is a physical manifestation of that meta-operator.
What does that truly imply about your agency? Not just in shaping your subjective experiences, but potentially in selecting or influencing the very fundamental dimensional layers of the reality you inhabit simply through the act of observing and integrating.
Something to think about.